For what purpose does the gentleman from Missouri seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials on H.R. 3898.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd yield myself.
Pursuant to House Resolution 936 and Rule 18, the Chair declares the House in the House Committee of the whole House of the State of the Union for the consideration of H.R. 3898. The Chair appoints the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Addison, to preside over the Committee of the Whole. Ms. McDowell. Oh, okay.
The House is in the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for the consideration of H.R. 3898, which the clerk will report by title.
A bill to amend the Federal Water Pollution Control Act to make targeted reforms with respect to waters of the United States and other matters and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the bill is considered read the first time. General debate shall be confined to the bill and amendments specified in Section 1 of House Resolution 936 and shall not exceed 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure or their respective designees. The gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Graves, and the gentleman from Michigan, Ms. Schulten, each will control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm proud to rise in support of H.R. 3898, the Promoting Efficiency Review for Modern Infrastructure today, or the Permit Act, which will make permitting processes under the Clean Water Act more efficient, more consistent, and transparent while continuing to protect our nation's water quality. Our Clean Water Act permitting regime is broken. When it takes up to 18 months to receive a permit under just the Clean Water Act to build a pipeline or a dam, a road, a pond, or a home, something is simply wrong. When wastewater utilities are being sued by the radical environmentalists because the EPA didn't give them a permit they could trust, something is wrong. When one state can weaponize the Clean Water Act to stop a pipeline that would allow citizens in other states to move off heating oil in the winter to a cheaper and more reliable source of energy for reasons not remotely related to water quality, something is wrong. When the federal government is allowed to write water quality standards that no one can afford without passing on costs to the ratepayers, or for which the technology to achieve such standards isn't even available in this country, something is wrong. I believe that regulations should be simple to understand, achievable, and easy to follow. Good process often leads to good decision-making, more consistent outcomes, and prosperity, and that's what this bill seeks to achieve. The partnership between the private sector, states, and the federal government envisioned by the Clean Water Act has worked to improve water quality nationwide. This is a very good thing. We all share the goal of achieving clean water. However, 50 years after its passage, the Clean Water Act needs modernization, just as simple as that. This bill makes common sense reforms such as clarifying the Section 401 process to stop it from being weaponized, codifying long-standing bipartisan exemptions from the definition of waters of the United States, placing clear timelines on judicial review for permits, and increasing transparency in the development of water quality standards. It also directs the Corps to eliminate the backlog of outstanding Section 404 permit applications and jurisdictional determinations, eliminates duplicative and unnecessary permitting processes for areas such as pesticide and aerial fire retardant use, and so much more. The bottom line is that without reforming the Clean Water Act, America cannot efficiently build roads, build bridges or pipelines or ponds or dams, levees, airports, homes, farms, and other infrastructure that we need. This bill acknowledges that we can both protect our natural resources and allow for development that benefits everyone in this country. Because of this, H.R. 3898 enjoys support from a wide range of stakeholders, from water utilities to energy developers to the construction industry to farmers to Main Street businesses. I'd urge my colleagues who support common sense solutions to vote in favor of H.R. 3898, and with that, I'd reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise today in opposition to H.R. 3898, the Permit Act. But I rise for so much more than simply to oppose this bill. The Clean Water Act was enacted into law 50 years ago at a time when our rivers were catching fire. Great Lakes were declared dead. For 50 years, we have seen our water pollution decrease because of the efficacy of this law. The Clean Water Act was not a perfect bill. No bill ever is. I will be the first to admit it needs reforms, but this bill is not it. So while I rise today in opposition to this bill, I rise for so much more than that. I rise for the affordability crisis that is crippling the American dream. This bill would shift costs from polluters to rural America, tribes, and disadvantaged communities. This is personal for me back home in Michigan, where our families are already struggling with the costs of clean water. The Permit Act will exacerbate this reality and task our most vulnerable communities with bearing the increased costs of polluters. I say let's hold the polluters accountable. H.R. 3898 will also put these disadvantaged communities' public health at risk, jacking up the price of their health care on top of their utility bills. I rise for affordability. I also rise against the increasing contamination of PFAS, toxic forever chemicals, in our water. Communities throughout West Michigan are working to combat PFAS contamination throughout our rivers and streams. This bill would protect PFAS polluters who put our families in harm's way. The Permit Act will effectively place responsibility of treating toxic pollution, including PFAS, lead, mercury, and arsenic, toward the American taxpayer. Mr. Chairman, I also rise for states' rights. The majority is falsely claiming that certain states are abusing their authority, their literal states' rights, if they deny traditional energy projects in their states. States of Washington and New York have provided the committee with documents outlining that the projects they've denied would have failed to meet the state water quality standards, and that violated their state environmental policy acts and would have adverse environmental impacts. The GOP is ignoring that fact, and weaponizing false claims to weaken state and tribal authority. I thought my colleagues on the other side of the aisle were supportive of increased state control over regulation. The Permit Act would weaken the ability of states like my home state of Michigan to pursue more rigorous protections for local waters and make our communities more vibrant. I rise for states' rights. I also rise for real permitting reform, Mr. Chairman. We need it now more than ever to help increase the accessibility, the flexibility of permits that are issued for projects across the country, but not at the expense of our clean water. We have lost over 50% of our wetlands in the United States of America. That comes at an increased cost at a time when costs are rising and flooding becomes more.
Sir, the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Collins.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your leadership in our committee and with this piece of legislation, as well as all my colleagues that had input into this piece of legislation. It is a great piece of common sense legislation. You know, I tell folks all the time, I got more years behind me than in front of me. And one of the reasons that I came to Washington, D.C. was to make sure that my kids and the next generation have the same opportunities that I did when I was growing up. This piece of legislation addresses that. It's one of many pieces, but it addresses that. And the fact that all we're doing is asking for the federal government to become more efficient, more productive. And when you do that, you make life more affordable for everyone. You see, Mr. Speaker, it just doesn't make common sense that it takes over 10 years to build a road out. When you spend over 7 years fighting for permits and fighting frivolous lawsuits with environmentalists on just a 2.5, 3-year build-out plan. It doesn't make common sense when an electric generating power company wants to build a natural gas facility, but they'll miss the economic growth because it takes over 10 years to get a permit to lay the pipeline. And it doesn't make common sense when our rural communities out there are struggling. Their water treatment facilities are worn out, they're old, but they can't participate in the economic growth that's coming because it'll take them over a decade to get a permit. And that's not just to mention the fact that this bill addresses clarity for our farmers out there or home building to make it more affordable. Now, Mr. Speaker, I know this is not a big, sexy headline topic, but this is an important piece of legislation that will help improve efficiency, productivity with our federal government, and make sure that life is more affordable so that these young people can get out there and chase their version of the American dream. I urge all my colleagues to support this piece of legislation. Let's get H.R. 3898 passed out of the House and sent over to the Senate. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
This is gentleman reserve. Gentleman reserves. Gentlewoman from Michigan is recognized.
Mr. Chair, I wish to yield 5 minutes to the esteemed ranking member of this committee, Representative Larson from Washington.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Skolton. And I rise today to oppose the Dirty Water Act. This bill will make it more difficult to keep our water clean and will ironically add more uncertainty to the permitting process, just the opposite of what we need to have happen. This bill guts federal, state, tribal, and local authority and resources to attain clean water and protect locally important water bodies. First, this bill significantly restricts federal oversight and regulatory authorities under the Clean Water Act. The current administration has already acted to slash federal funding for clean water and eliminate agency staff. This bill compounds those efforts and will leave federal agencies powerless to fulfill their responsibilities under the Clean Water Act. Second, the bill undermines the partnership that the federal government has with states and tribes to prevent pollution, weakening states and tribes' ability to better protect their own water. The result will be more pollution in our nation's rivers, streams, and lakes, thanks to loopholes, legal shields, and limited oversight of polluters. Third, this bill will end up slowing projects by increasing regulatory uncertainty and delay. Democrats want to pass bills and invest in infrastructure and get projects done. That's why we passed the bipartisan infrastructure law. It invested in all types of infrastructure for communities nationwide. Fully funding projects and federal agencies charged with approving them is the quickest way to get this infrastructure built. Instead, this bill, when paired with efforts to cut funding as well as other federal water infrastructure programs, all that will slow down investments in cleaner and greener and safer and more accessible state and local projects. Under this bill, communities of all sizes will end up with dirtier water and be left with the cost of cleanup. This will hurt rural communities, minority communities. It will hurt them especially hard, as well as other communities struggling financially under the policies of the current administration. This bill shifts the cost of pollution from polluters to American families, who will have to spend more for safe drinking water and to access water-related recreational areas if such resources are even still available. Members of this committee, on a bipartisan basis, have supported predictability in regulating clean water, and there is another way. We don't have to choose between clean water and a robust economy. We can have both. My state's a great example, defined by its clean water, including the Puget Sound and hundreds of lakes and thousands of miles of rivers and streams throughout Washington. We all know that rivers, streams, and wetlands are intrinsically connected, and the health of the waters in my state and its water-related economy depend upon a strong partnership with the federal government and a level playing field among its upstream users and downstream neighbors, including local tribal communities. During the consideration of this bill in the committee, my Democratic colleagues offered several amendments to fix the loopholes, liability shields, and limited oversight for polluters contained in this bill. These amendments targeted the most egregious provisions of this bill, not every provision of the bill. Provisions that eviscerated federal and state clean water agencies, provisions that made it easier for polluters to put more toxic and cancer-causing chemicals in waters, such as PFAS, arsenic, pesticides, and provisions that endanger not only our own health, but the health of local, regional, and state economies. These were all defeated on party line votes, unfortunately. But honestly, I do look forward to the T&I committee returning to its bipartisan work and create effective legislation that will upgrade our infrastructure, that will build our economy and create jobs, all while protecting our waters. Unfortunately, The outcome of this bill, if enacted, will be increasing pollution and contamination of our waters. And I oppose this bill, and I urge my colleagues to do the same. And with that, yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Reserve.
Gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I yield, I would like to point out that in the Transportation Committee, we can disagree, oppose, debate, and we remain friends, both within our parties and across the aisle. And I'm proud of the committee for that, both the minority and the majority side. In fact, I'm very proud of that aspect. At this time, I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Utah, Mr. Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I, too, want to thank Chairman Graves for his leadership in advancing common sense permitting reform that cuts red tapes and restores accountability to the federal decision-making. I'm proud that one of our top priorities as Congress, the Water Quality Transparency Act, is included in this package. This legislation will finally bring clarity and consistency to the Clean Water Act permitting process by requiring EPA to publish clear, accessible guidance on the water quality certifications. For Utah and other Western states where water is scarce and infrastructure projects are critical to our growth, this reform is a game changer. Too often, confusing and inconsistent permitting rules delay or derail projects that communities depend on, whether it's water storage, energy development, or transportation. The Permit Act is about delivering certainty and efficiency without compromising environmental standards. I'm proud to support it and look forward to getting across the line for Utahns and for Americans across the country. Thank you, and I yield back.
Reserve.
Gentleman reserves. The
Mr. Chair,
gentlewoman from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wish to yield 2 minutes to Representative Poe from New Jersey. Thank you.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to oppose this bill, H.R. 3898, because it's an affront to the environmental stewardship everywhere. It undermines the 50 years of vital clean water process and weakens the ability of states like New Jersey to control pollution in its own waters. Supporting localities in their efforts to provide clean water is one of my top priorities as a member of the Water Resource and Environment Subcommittee. I know firsthand the danger of aging stormwater, sewer, and flood infrastructure in our environment and health. It is unacceptable that this bill will allow polluters to release raw and partially untreated sewage into our waters because they believe that the water treatment technology is much too expensive. These environmental rollbacks will only make our wealthiest polluters richer and our riverfront communities sicker. Stormwater infrastructure is critical. Our communities must have the tools that they need to keep people safe. That's why I offered an amendment to require that the EPA to certify before implementing this bill that it will not increase sewer overflow, stormwater discharges, or flooding risk. Unfortunately, the amendment was blocked by the House majority. These critical and terrible, horrible hazard and endanger personal properties, businesses, local economies, and critical infrastructures, and most importantly, human lives and safety. This bill allows irreparable, preventable damage in our communities. I urge all of my colleagues to vote no. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
Gentlewoman reserves. Gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I'd yield 2 minutes to my colleague from Missouri, Mr. Burleson.
Gentleman is recognized.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of the Permit Act introduced by my good friend and chairman of the Water Resources and Environmental Subcommittee, Congressman Mike Collins. This bold legislation delivers a long overdue blow to the radical environmental agenda that has weaponized the Clean Water Act, paving the way for critical infrastructure projects to move forward and be free from regulatory shackles imposed by this Washington swamp. For too long, the federal government and environmentalist activists have waged legal warfare on our farmers, small businesses, and job-creating projects causing endless delays in litigation. President Trump's vision is clear. America is building again. And my Judicial Review Timeline Clarity Act, which is included in this vital permitting reform package, establishes a strict 60-day window to challenge the Section 404 permits once the Army Corps of Engineers grants authorization. Section 404 of the Clean Water Act exists to safeguard our waters, not empower radical environmentalists to harass hardworking Americans with legal hurdles years after permits are granted. Let me be clear. The days of radical environmentalists holding our nation's projects hostage with their anti-growth and anti-job agenda is over. The Permit Act slashes red tape. It ends bureaucratic overreach and restores freedom to build an America that works for its people again. And I commend Chairman Graves and Subcommittee Chairman Collins for their leadership in advancing this pro-growth, America First legislation. And I urge my colleagues to support this bill. Thank you, and I yield back.
Reserve.
Gentleman reserves. The gentlewoman from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentlelady from the great state of Michigan, Ms. Kristen McDonald-Rivet.
Gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me be clear, we need permitting reform. Red tape and layers of bureaucracy have crippled cities working to add housing, alternative energy sources, critical economic development projects, and ultimately gets in the way of jobs. I concede that. It gets in the way of progress and even stops our agenda to lower the costs for struggling families. I support the idea of what this bill is trying to accomplish. However, the Permit Act in this current form is not the solution. It lacks common sense and ultimately hurts middle-class and working-class Americans. So let's start here. The efficiency in government cannot come at the expense of clean water and lowering costs for all Americans. If passed as is, the Permit Act will increase pollution in our public waters and strip state and tribal rights to effectively protect their own waters. It will also dramatically increase water bills across the country, particularly in rural communities. I proudly represent the city of Flint. We know devastating consequences of a lack of oversight of water quality. Over a decade later, my constituents are still dealing with the health and economic fallout, and the trust in government in our home communities will never be the same. Efficiency is important. American industry will falter and families will suffer if unnecessary red tape gets in the way of innovation and building. But as we cut red tape, we need to do so in a smart way, not in a way that will put clean water at risk, especially for the rural, tribal, and low-income communities who stand to lose the most in this bill. For this reason, at the appropriate time, I will offer a motion to recommit this bill back to committee. If the House rules permitted, I would have offered the motion with an important amendment to this bill. My amendment would prohibit the implementation of any provisions in this bill that increase water pollution, jeopardize states' abilities to set their own water standards, or increase water utility costs for Americans. This isn't radical environmentalism. This is moving forward on permit reform with common sense. At the end of this debate, I will insert...
Gentlewoman's time is expired.
Yield additional time.
Gentlewoman is recognized.
At the end of the debate, I will insert into the record the text of this amendment. I hope my colleagues will join me in voting for the motion to recommit. Thank you, and I yield back.
Reserve.
Gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I would yield 2 minutes to the Western Caucus Chairman, the gentleman from California, Mr. LaMaffa.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. I rise today in support of the Permit Act, which includes important provisions from my own bill, the Forest Protection and Wildland Firefighter Safety Act. In the West, we live with the reality that a single spark can turn into a forest disaster instantly, or like we saw 11 months ago in Pacific Palisades and Altadena. In my district, the city of Paradise is still rebuilding from the 2018 Camp Fire. Every season brings the same concern, as well as the disappearance of the towns of Greenville and Canyon Dam in Plumas County. We need every tool to keep ready from a new small fire from turning into the next catastrophe. One of the most important tools we have, the Forest Service relies on, is the use of aerial fire retardant, that pinkish red stuff you see coming out of the DC-10s and many other aircraft. It effectively slows the spread of fast-moving fires and gives the hand crews and trucks on the ground a chance to get control. But a lawsuit by an environmental group claimed the Forest Service can't use this retardant without a Clean Water Act permit, even though it's used it for dozens of years very successfully. A judge agreed. Now that group is working to block the use of retardant altogether while the Forest Service waits for permits to grind through an EPA process. Thankfully, a temporary stay on the lawsuit didn't take this critical tool away starting last 2 years ago. 47 states have delegated authority under the Clean Water Act. That means that even after the EPA issues a permit, those states, including my home of California, would have to issue their own permits. This would create a maze of different requirements and bog down the Forest Service in red tape at the exact moment when the speed matters. My bill fixes that. Clean Water Act already recognizes the difference between fighting fires and causing pollution. My bill ensures that the aerial fire retardant, which is already subject to strict Forest Service rules, is treated the same way as runoff from other fire control activities, so our firefighters aren't stuck waiting on paperwork, permit approvals when lives and towns are in harm's way. We've seen what happens when delays allow the fires to get ahead of us. California's lost over 13.5 million acres the last decade. We can't afford to tie the hands. We can't afford to tie the hands of them. I urge this provision, and please vote for the Permit Act.
Reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlewoman from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentlelady from the great state of California, Doris Matsui.
Gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to speak in opposition to H.R. 3898. Clean water used to be something we all agreed upon. The Clean Water Act was originally passed by overwhelming bipartisan majorities because we understood that clean water is not a luxury. It's really a basic right. But now Republicans in this chamber are doing everything they can to roll back and repeal what's left of the Clean Water Act. Among the many disaster provisions in this bill, the Permit Act will give President Trump the authority to declare any body of water exempt from the Clean Water Act protections. It's just a stunning betrayal of the American people. Outside these walls, Americans overwhelmingly support the Clean Water Act. Survey after survey has found the Americans believe the government should do more to protect our lakes, rivers, and streams, not less. This should not be a hard vote. I urge my colleagues to protect clean water and urge no on H.R. 3898, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Reserve.
Gentlewoman reserves. I recognize the gentleman from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I inquire as to time remaining?
The gentleman from Missouri has 19 and a half minutes remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I would yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Taylor.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you also to Chairman Graves and Chairman Collins for their hard work on this pragmatic and effective piece of legislation. I rise today in support of H.R. 3898, the Permit Act, which would cut red tape within the Clean Water Act's permitting processes. This legislation will provide much-needed regulatory certainty for America's farmers, small businesses, manufacturers, home and road builders, and many other permit holders. My colleagues across the aisle continue to promote the fallacy that improving permitting processes comes at the expense of the environment. Congress can continue to be good stewards of our environment while also removing regulations and processes that do not protect the environment, but rather create obstacles that prevent economic growth and prosperity in Ohio and across the country. Among its provisions, the Permit Act makes common sense reforms to the Clean Water Act permitting process that will continue to protect our nation's water resources. These reforms increase transparency, provide clarity and consistency for permit holders so they can maintain compliance with the law and provide reasonable guardrails to prevent the weaponization of these permitting processes. In particular, I'm proud that my bill, the Confidence in Clean Water Permits Act, is included in the underlying legislation. My bill provides reasonable protections for National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permit holders against frivolous lawsuits if they are acting in good faith and within the scope of their permits. Permit holders who are in compliance with these permits and who often provide well-paying jobs to Americans should not be punished with frivolous lawsuits when they comply with the terms of their permits. I encourage my colleagues to vote in favor of the Permit Act to provide regulatory relief and certainty under the Clean Water Act for businesses in Ohio and across the nation. Thank you, and I yield back.
Reserve.
Gentleman reserves. The gentlewoman from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just need to say I agree with so much of what my colleague said about the need for real permitting reform, but that is not this bill. The Permit Act is nothing more than a dirty water bill dressed up in a fancy name. We need to come back to the table, reject this bill, and pass real and meaning permitting reform that will not pass the cost of polluted waters on to vulnerable communities, rural, tribal communities. Let's come back to the drawing board and reject the Permit Act. Mr. Chair, I want to yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentlelady from Washington, Representative Pramila Jayapal.
The gentlelady is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in strong opposition to the Permit Act, Republicans' latest attempt to help corporate polluters dodge responsibility. This alarming bill would weaken the Army Corps' permitting process and EPA's Clean Water Act authorities, threatening my district where the Clean Water Act protects our waters and our salmon and our people. Moreover, this bill would impose an unworkably short 60-day review of dredge and fill permits. 2 months is simply not enough time for under-resourced communities to understand the effects that a project could have, let alone to mount any meaningful opposition to protect themselves. Access to judicial review ensures that communities, tribes, and local governments can challenge decisions and raise potential harms that have not yet been considered. Without it, agency actions just go completely unchecked. This legislation prioritizes polluters over people's clean water, over public health, and especially puts all of the harms disproportionately on our low-income, our rural, our communities of color. They deserve so much better. They deserve our support rather than throwing them under the bus. Our permitting systems do need to be improved, and we have found a way in our state to do that. This is a false solution that attacks essential clean water safeguards and undermines access to our courts. I oppose it, and I hope, as the ranking member said, that we can come back and do real permitting reform that doesn't throw communities under the bus and protects our waters. I yield back.
Reserve.
Gentlelady yields. The gentlelady from Michigan reserves.
Thank you, sir.
Gentleman from Missouri, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I would yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Shreve.
The gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. Appreciate the time, and I appreciate my colleague Mike Collins' work on this common sense package of clean water reforms. I'm grateful that my bill, H.R. 3934, the Water Quality Standards Attainability Act, is included. My bill serves to maintain state and local leadership in setting their water quality standards under the Clean Water Act. Let me cite a compelling example of why this legislation is necessary. In 2020, the EPA approved Indianapolis, back in my district, our new standards for stormwater management. These updates were made to ensure that Hoosiers had access to clean water and that our localities were able to deliver on this responsibility. But in early 24, under the Biden EPA, this approval was revoked for the infrastructure updates that were already well underway, costing our taxpayers needless millions. This unpredictability has been a practice of our federal government for too long. It's time our local governments and taxpayers had the transparency and certainty with which to cost-effectively invest in our infrastructure. My legislation will ensure that this regulatory whiplash is in our rearview mirror. My bill will ensure that when states write their rules, they consider affordability and accessibility to water treatment technologies. Through this legislation, we're providing certainty and predictability in the EPA approval process and a little Hoosier common sense in delivering. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Missouri reserves. The gentlelady from Michigan is recognized.
Mr. Chair, I would like to yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentlelady from Maryland, Representative Ellsworth.
Gentlelady is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2.8 million acres of farmland protected, 35,000 miles of fish passages opened, nearly 1,500 new public water access sites established. upgrades to every large wastewater treatment plant in the watershed to improve water quality, and the largest oyster reef restoration in the world. Mr. Speaker, these are just 5 of the biggest wins in the last 43 years of the landmark Chesapeake Bay Agreement. In fact, it was just updated last week after years of careful and difficult negotiation and public input to unite states across the bay to think bigger and bolder to restore the beloved watershed we all share. We know that water does not adhere to arbitrary political boundaries. Pollution in Pennsylvania will and does flow downstream to Maryland and Virginia. All states rely on the EPA to conduct oversight and enforcement of pollution entering our waterways and to hold everyone accountable to our shared communities. Yet the bill before us today, the Permit Act, attempts to dismantle this partnership between states and the EPA by watering down the key enforcement mechanisms that are needed to ensure compliance with evidence-based pollution standards. I know these bipartisan multi-state partnerships are not easy. I was a part of them before I joined this chamber. They take years of collaboration. And that should be fostered, Mr. Speaker, and not dismantled by this and future Congresses, which is why I urge my colleagues to support this decades-long partnership by voting no on this bill, and I yield that back.
The gentlelady from Michigan reserves. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Stauber.
Gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of H.R. 3898, the Permit Act. Our permitting system is a great burden to our nation. Permitting delays infrastructure projects indefinitely and stops us from bringing critical energy sources online. It also deters investment in our communities. So make no mistake, permitting is holding back America. H.R. 3898, the Promoting Efficient Review for Modern Infrastructure Today Act, also known as a Permit Act, aims to unleash the American economy. It's a package of common sense reforms that will reduce regulatory burdens, establish certainty, and increase transparency in our permitting system. This bill will in turn create opportunities for home builders, our farmers, loggers, our small business owners, and entice them to invest in projects that help our local communities grow. I'd like to highlight Section 12 of H.R. 3898. Section 12 is the language of my bill, the Reducing Permitting Uncertainty Act. Section 404C of the Clean Water Act allows the EPA to veto a dredge and fill permit. However, the EPA under Biden has taken it upon itself to proactively reject permits and retroactively take away permits. In a country of due process, it is absurd that a government can dictate whether a project is good or bad even before an application is filed. And the fact that the government can waltz in and shut down years of hard work is staggering. This section of H.R. 3898 is not a dramatic departure from the status quo. It clarifies timelines and brings certainty. When an application is pending, the EPA can determine whether or not to veto. It's simple. It does not alter the process, nor does it deprive the EPA of its right to veto. It returns our process to one based on science and facts rather than politics. I'd like to thank Congressman Collins for his efforts on this package of reforms, and I look forward to supporting it, and I yield back.
Reserves. The gentlelady from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, you will hear no argument from me about the need for permitting reform. We do need reform, but this bill is not what we need. It doesn't just cut red tape, it cuts all the tape that has protected our clean water for 50 years since the Clean Water Act was signed into law. The reason we don't have horror stories of rivers catching on fire and the Great Lakes being declared dead is because of the protection that the Clean Water Act has provided. Despite dramatic population growth, the number of waters meeting water quality standards has doubled since the CWA's passage in 1972. I will be the first to admit we need reform of our permitting process, but this dirty water bill is not it. Mr. Chairman, excuse me, I would like to yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from New York, Representative Tonko.
Gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank the gentlelady for yielding. Our waterways, our waters are precious resources, and we need to advance policies that protect that precious resource, and certainly policies that enable us to be resourceful in the use of this commodity. So in my youth, growing up in my home and hometown of Amsterdam, New York, if you wanted to know what color the Mohawk carpet mills were dyeing their carpets that day, all you had to do was look at the flow of the Chuctanunda Creek as it emptied into the Mohawk River. With the passage of the Clean Water Act, Congress took historic action to protect public health and improve the quality of drinking water across our great country. Our rivers, our brooks, our streams are the center of our communities, and we have come so far to protect and strengthen these resources for the generations that will follow. Instead of strengthening our waterways, this bill today that we're debating on the House floor is a wholesale attack on what is left of the Clean Water Act, a 1-2 punch that would allow more forever chemicals and harmful pollutants to be discharged into our waterways with little regulation while diluting the ability for states and tribes to take action to protect their communities. I continue to believe there is a genuine interest in Congress on both sides of the aisle to advance durable, bipartisan solutions to meet our nation's energy demands, to create good jobs, and to safeguard our communities and environment. And I would encourage my Republican colleagues to focus on real solutions instead of giveaways to polluters. This special interest crowd that is getting different treatment to pollute and not respect our resources has got to stop. With that, I yield back, and please oppose this bill.
Reserves? Reserve. Gentleman from Michigan reserves. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This time I'd yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Petronis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to my friend Aaron Beam for introducing this amendment. Mr. Chair, after working hard to obtain federal approval in the first Trump administration, a weaponized court system pulled Florida's 404 permitting from under us, even though our program was thoroughly vetted and approved in 2020. Florida's DEP has become a national model for environmental protection, and Washington should be learning from us, not tying our hands. The amendment makes it clear, once a state assumption program is approved, the EPA cannot withdraw it unless Congress explicitly says so. No more regulatory whiplash, no more political games. For Florida, this is critical. It protects our Section 404, and it ends the uncertainty caused by courts' conflicting rulings, shifting interpretations in Washington. Meanwhile, the Army Corps of Engineers got a gut punch, overwhelming caseload, working hard to try to solve what an activist judge has placed, with dozens of projects on hold in our communities that they desperately need, like stormwater, schools, even sewer treatment plants not under construction, protecting our most precious environments, but we can't unless the permits can be issued. This is about predictability, federalism, and letting the states manage their own waterways. It's pro-infrastructure, pro-development, but most importantly, it's pro-environmental protection. Mr. Chair, I yield.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Missouri reserves. The gentleman from gentlelady from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wish to yield 3 minutes to the distinguished gentlelady from the great state of Michigan, Representative Tlaib.
The gentlelady from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you. We know the Dirty Water Bill reduces significant oversight for the Clean Water Act, and it's really important to know polluters are pushing to weakening this, not residents, not families, not communities that are directly impacted. This is about discharging toxic chemicals into our water bodies. And I want folks to understand, last year, Congress rejected last year many of the changes being proposed now in the Permit Act because it has damaging impacts to the health of families, the economy, and our environment. It's not just this bill, Mr. Speaker. This week, Republicans are voting now on 5 dirty energy bills that attack communities I represent. These bills boost dirty energy power plants, even as energy companies are transitioning towards cleaner energy. Dirty energy plants have historically been located in communities that look like mine, in rural communities and minority communities. In Michigan, we already know that certain communities are facing disproportionate burden from electricity generation. Just ask the residents of Southwest Detroit and downriver in Michigan. They have felt the harm and seen the harm and the lived experience of being next to DTE's oil-fired power plant that made them sick. It's immoral, Mr. Speaker, and Congress must fix it. Yet, many of the pro-polluting Republicans in this chamber want to talk about making electricity with reliable, quote, reliable generation facilities, when they really are talking about more expensive, dirty energy. There's nothing, quote, reliable about air pollution giving our children asthma. Children not only have the right to be able to not go hungry, but they have a right to breathe clean air. The only thing folks can rely on right now with these plants is getting sicker. I proposed 2 amendments this week, Mr. Speaker, to protect our communities, but they were rejected. They would have made sure that we had full information, transparency on the disparate impact and cumulative impacts on minority, rural, disadvantaged, and tribal communities, and would have had added safeguards that would have been able to be define what real, reliable generation facilities are. Again, they were not interested. Why? Because we know that clean water and clean air is never a priority. It's always going to be about profits for corporate polluting donors. If you want, quote, reliable generation facilities, make them clean so they're not actively poisoning our neighbors and destroying our communities and making them less attractive places to live, work, and invest. And I promise, if you go to your community and ask them about this dirty water permit bill that you guys are pushing for, as well as what was passed with the energy bills, overwhelmingly, over across party lines, they will tell you, protect our land, protect our soil, protect our water, protect our environment, protect our health. With that, I yield back to...
Gentlelady yields back. Gentlelady from Michigan reserves.
Reserve.
Gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I'd yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Hurd.
Gentleman from Colorado is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am proud to co-sponsor the Permit Act, common sense legislation to help America build the infrastructure we need faster and more responsibly. I'm especially grateful that my bill, the Jurisdictional Determination Backlog Reduction Act, is included as a part of this package. Across the country, Americans depend on timely answers from the Army Corps so they know whether their projects require Clean Water Act permits. But the Corps is not keeping up. Right now, thousands of determinations and wetlands delineations are stuck in a backlog, leaving projects in limbo. My proposal directs the Corps to clear this backlog so that landowners and builders get the determinations and clarity. Chairman Collins and the Water Resources and Environment Subcommittee staff for their work putting together a bill that cuts red tape, reduces duplicative reviews, and gives farmers, ranchers, utilities, and communities in Colorado and across the country the regulatory certainty that they need to build. I look forward to advancing this important legislation, and with that, I yield back.
Gentleman from Colorado yields back. Gentleman from Missouri reserves.
Reserve.
Gentlelady from Michigan is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, how much time do I have remaining?
Gentlelady has seven minutes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, I wish to yield 1 minute to Representative Cohen from the great state of Tennessee.
The gentleman from the great state of Tennessee is indeed recognized.
Thank you, Speaker, from the great state of Tennessee. I rise in strong opposition to the Permit Act. For over 50 years, the Clean Water Act has protected rivers, streams, and wetlands that our communities rely on. This bill undermines these protections by shielding polluters from responsibility for toxic wastes like PFAS, lead, mercury, and arsenic, and by limiting federal review and community input when drinking water is at risk. I filed 3 straightforward amendments to protect public health. 1, to require cumulative impacts and groundwater reviews for projects near community drinking water aquifers like the one that supplies Memphis. A second one, to restore oversight and public participation for nationwide permits, protections that would have prevented the Byhalia pipeline from being rushed through my district. And third, to require the EPA to certify that this bill will not increase exposure to harmful contaminants. Unfortunately, none were made in order. Therefore, I oppose the bill and urge a no vote. Permitting reform should not come at the expense of children and seniors' health, clean drinking water, or communities with a history of industrial exposure. And I do this because of a commitment to the safety of the people and looking at my dear friend, Mr. Graves, I hate to speak against one of his bills because he was such a good ally when I was on transportation, and I have great respect for him. But nevertheless, I'm against the bill. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Tennessee yields back. Gentlelady from Michigan reserves. Gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I would yield 2 minutes to the Chairman of the Highway and Transit Subcommittee, the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Rouser.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Mr. Chairman. You know, listening to our friends on the other side of the aisle reminds me of what one of my favorite presidents of the United States once said, Mr. Reagan, President Reagan. He said, you know, our friends on the other side of the aisle, they know so much that just isn't so. And American Energy Infrastructure Act. Each addresses well-documented breakdowns in our nation's permitting process which delay critical projects, drive up cost, and do nothing to actually improve water quality. The Nationwide Permitting Improvement Act narrows the scope of the Clean Water Act Section 401 certifications to actual water quality impacts and establishes timelines and procedural guardrails of state-level review to prevent misuse and delay. The Reducing Regulatory Burdens Act removes the need for duplicative national pollutant discharge elimination system permits for pesticide use if the pesticide is already EPA approved and used according to label requirements, which will reduce cost without weakening, again, without weakening environmental protections. Finally, the Improving Water Quality Certifications and American Energy Infrastructure Act codifies the historic nationwide permit process under Section 404, extends permit validity to 10 years, and clarifies jurisdiction over dredge and field discharges, providing predictability for infrastructure and energy developers. So together, the enactment of all these bills will result in clear rules and predictable timelines that will cut cost and promote economic growth while maintaining environmental protections. That's how you battle inflation. I yield back.
Yields back. Gentleman from Missouri reserves.
Reserve, and I don't have any more speakers. I'm prepared to close.
Okay. Gentlelady from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I ask unanimous consent to include in the congressional record a list of over 180 conservation, recreation, hunting, fishing, environmental, tribal, and state organizations that oppose the Permit Act.
Gentlelady's request is covered by general leave.
Mr. Chair, we must think carefully before we act today about what will be lost when the Permit Act is signed into law. As I stated throughout our proceedings today, I agree we need permitting reform, but this bill is not it. We can come back to the table and come up with solutions that will do both. Enhance the speed, clarity, and efficacy with which we issue permits in the United States of America without polluting our water. We have to think about the 50% of wetlands that have been lost, the over 70% of rivers and streams that are losing their protections and could join that 50% in being lost forever. As an avid outdoorswoman who loves to hunt and fish, our entire family is four-season anglers throughout the great state of Michigan. I urge my colleagues to think carefully about what we will be losing. We can come together and advocate for meaningful permitting reform. We need staff to administer permits. The current administration cannot gut federal agencies on one hand and claim to want speedy federal processes on the other. The Army Corps' 3 senior-most experts have left the agency, as well as an additional 15 to 30% of the regulatory staff. This has impacted West Michigan in particular, as we've seen firsthand additional delays under this administration in permitting from the Army Corps. The Permit Act simply directs the Corps and EPA to rewrite federal rules, again, stoking even more uncertainty. My Democratic colleagues and I agree that we need to issue permits more expeditiously in this country. We can do that while not giving up access to clean water. Mr. Chair, I yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentlelady from Michigan yields back. Gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In closing, H.R. 3898 is critical to achieving more efficient, predictable, useful permitting for many important projects by streamlining and improving the Clean Water Act's permitting process. As has been stated, H.R. 3898 will support everyday Americans in every district across this nation by making common sense reforms to the Clean Water Act, unleashing America's ability to increase transparency in the development of water quality standards. It also directs the Corps to eliminate the backlog of outstanding Section 404 permit applications and jurisdictional determinations. It eliminates duplicative, unnecessary permitting processes for areas such as pesticide and aerial, fire retardant use, and so much more. The bottom line is we cannot effectively build roads, bridges, pipelines, ports, dams, levees, airports, homes, farms, and many, many other important infrastructure projects. This bill is a product of hard work by many members of the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. In particular, I want to thank Representatives Rick Crawford, David Rouser, Doug LaMaffa, Pete Stauber, Dusty Johnson, Burgess Owens, Eric Burleson, Jeff Hurd, Jefferson Shreve, Dave Taylor, and Jimmy Petronas, who all contributed provisions to this bill. And I also want to especially thank the chairman of the subcommittee, Mike Collins, for working with me on this and his leadership. He's shown extraordinary leadership in developing this very important issue. And with that, I do want to thank the gentlelady from Michigan, my friend, for her friendship in this process. And I would urge support for the bill and yield back.
The gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Grave, yields back the balance of his time. All time for general debate has expired. Pursuant to the rule, the bill as amended shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. The amendment, in the nature of a substitute, recommended by the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure, printed in the bill, is adopted. The bill, as amended, shall be considered as an original bill for the purpose of further amendment under the 5-minute rule and shall be considered as read. No further amendment to the bill, as amended, shall be in order except those printed in Part A of the House Report 119-399. Each such further amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and opponent, and shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 1, printed in Part A of House Report 119-399. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 1, printed in Part A of House Report number 119-399, offered by Mr. Bean of Florida.
Pursuant to House Resolution 936, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Bean, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
If you build it, he will come. If you build it, he will come. Those are the words Kevin Costner's character famously heard. A mysterious voice encouraged him to construct the most famous baseball field in America, the Field of Dreams. Unfortunately, Mr. Chairman, that only happens in the movies. Because for the last 2 years, if anyone in the free state of Florida tries to build anything, only the Washington bureaucracy will come. But this wasn't always the case. In 2020, Florida became the third state, joining Michigan and New Jersey to implement and run a Clean Water Act Section 404 permitting program. These state-run programs reduce duplicative requirements, reduce cost, and expedite permit approval times exactly as Congress intended. Throughout the state administered review process, federal agencies maintained robust oversight to ensure Florida's 404 permitting program complied with all federal requirements, while the EPA maintained strict control over Florida's decisions. However, Florida's Florida's successful permitting program, along with Michigan and New Jersey, has been thrown into limbo by litigation, stripping Florida of its ability to run its program. The court's decision, which is contrary to the position of both the Trump and Biden administrations, has shifted permitting authority back to the federal government, creating enormous disruptions to Florida's efforts to protect wetlands and water resources, and is now blocking Florida's ability to issue necessary permits for development projects across the state, including projects to restore Florida's Everglades, projects to build or improve sidewalks, bridges, utilities, roads, and highways, solar energy projects, and other projects that impact grid reliability. The ability for states to take the lead in regulating their natural resources is vital, particularly like a state like Florida, where growing our economy is contingent on protecting the environment. Mr. Chairman, that's why the Bean Amendment seeks to codify the permitting program administered by the states of Florida, Michigan, and New Jersey, and to provide certainty to the other states lined up to do the same. These states have been examples of cooperation between the state and federal government, and now Congress must provide clarity and confidence for any additional state interested in joining these three. We need this amendment because protecting the environment in Florida is protecting our field of dreams. Mr. Chairman, I reserve.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Michigan seek recognition?
I oppose the amendment. Despite my friendship with the gentleman from Florida, I rise to oppose the amendment offered by my good friend, Mr. Bean.
The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, despite our friendship, I do oppose Mr. Bean's amendment, yet support the programs that have been implemented in Florida, Michigan, and New Jersey, and we want them to continue. However, Mr. Chairman, this amendment seeks to legislatively mandate approval of a program without changes that was adopted without the proper and necessary oversight and review. The Clean Water Act was specifically enacted as a federal-state partnership. The Environmental Protection Agency has approved 47 states to implement the point source discharge program under Section 402 of the Clean Water Act. And having states as co-regulators makes comprehensive implementation of this program possible. However, far fewer states have sought approval to regulate the discharge of dredge and fill materials under Section 404 of the Act, again, with only New Jersey and my home state of Michigan currently approved to implement this authority. We do hope Florida will go back to the administration and seek approval once again, but this amendment relates to Florida's attempts to receive approval of its own Section 404 program without the proper process. In 2024, a federal district court struck down the approval of Florida's 404 permit authority on the grounds that both the state and federal agencies failed to follow the rules in approving the state's program. I'm not opposed to the state of Florida or any state seeking to manage 404 authorities within its borders. In fact, I've been a huge champion of this program. The state of Florida can pursue implementing a 404 program, but through the proper approval process, through the administration. Congress should not mandate a program that has been deemed deficient by the courts. I oppose the amendment and encourage my colleagues to do the same, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you very much. I would remind the gentlelady from Michigan, no one's going to fight harder. Michigan is such a beautiful state. It's got one of the longest freshwater coastlines of any state. That may be a trivia fact, but no one is going to fight harder for Michigan's environment than the people of Michigan. This amendment gives them that authority back. And so I'd ask her to reconsider her opposition. And Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record 2 letters, one from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection in support of the Bean Amendment, and a letter also from the National Association of Home Builders detailing how passage of the Bean Amendment and underlying bill will lead to the creation of more attainable housing. I reserve.
Gentleman's request is covered by general leave. The gentleman reserves. Gentlelady from Michigan is recognized. Gentlelady reserves. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
This has been a model. This program works. The Reagan administration approved Michigan's program. The Clinton administration approved New Jersey's program, and then Florida's program was approved by the Trump administration, but then defended by the Biden administration. This is something we should agree on. Bipartisan support to help protect the environment. Yeah, it's Florida, Michigan, and New Jersey, but here are the states that are in line that say we want to protect our own environment too. Alaska, Arizona, Indiana, Kentucky, Maryland, Minnesota, North Dakota, Oregon, and Virginia. They're all in line to fight for their own state and protect the environment in their own state. So with that, as I wrap up, Chairman Gray.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution, whatever it is, I rise to offer an amendment to H.R. 3898 called the Permit Act.
Clerk?
Yes, sir.
Does the gentleman have an amendment at the desk?
Yes.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 2, printed in Part A of House Report number 119-399, offered by Mr. Babin of Texas.
Pursuant to House Resolution 936, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Babin, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate that very, very much. Pipelines and energy infrastructure are the backbone of American energy dominance. Yet Section 401 of the Clean Water Act, designed to protect our water quality, has too often become a roadblock for critical projects. Too many states are using this authority to block interstate natural gas pipelines, transmission lines, and other federally approved projects for reasons that have nothing whatsoever to do with water quality. These projects are routinely certified by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission as being in the national interest, yet they are never built because a single state can withhold or delay a 401 certification. We've all seen the consequences: delays that stretch on for years, procedural roadblocks that force applicants to withdraw and to resubmit just to restart the process, legal hurdles so steep that a single denial can derail an entire multi-state project or to kill it altogether. Meanwhile, these very same states continue benefiting from the affordable, reliable energy produced in other parts of the country, even as they obstruct the pipelines needed for our nation's development, economic security, and long-term competitiveness. This amendment tackles that problem head-on. It establishes expedited judicial review for major energy infrastructure projects, ensuring that the courts reach timely decisions. It also limits standing to the applicant or those who face direct or irreparable harm, preventing activist groups from weaponizing the process to stall projects that are essential to our power grid, our economy, and, most importantly, to our national security. Mr. Speaker, we cannot meet growing energy demand, power our data centers, or lead the world in AI without the infrastructure to move American energy. It's impossible. This amendment is a targeted, responsible solution and a crucial step forward toward restoring America's energy dominance. I would urge all of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support this amendment, and I reserve.
Gentleman from Texas reserves. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Michigan seek recognition?
I rise in opposition to amendment number 2.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
I oppose the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas. This amendment doubles down on 2 of the bad ideas in the base of the text of the Permit Act, limiting a state's right to protect its own water resources and limiting legitimate civil action on harmful permits. This amendment limits lawsuits to within 30 days of Clean Water Act Section 401 certification, with the very high bar of imminent irreparable economic harm. Not only is this hard to prove, but impacts can come in many forms beyond basic economic impacts. Further, if the court doesn't act within the amendment's arbitrary shot clock, the suit is automatically denied with prejudice, meaning that the suit can't be brought again through no fault of the harmed party. Finally, this amendment requiring any suit to be filed within 30 days also applies to the operation of whatever the license or permit is for. As we know, many infrastructure projects are designed to be in service for 100 years. Who knows what impacts might come 50 or 75 years down the road, or what changes will occur if the company stops maintaining a facility in the future. This provision is dangerous and a short-sighted assault on the ability to maintain clean water. I encourage my colleagues to oppose the amendment, and I would like to yield the balance of my time to the gentleman from, do you want to go next? Are you ready? Okay, actually, I'm going to reserve, Mr. Chairman.
Gentlelady reserved. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Well, I thank the gentlelady and understand her opposition, but her reasons for opposing this amendment are the very reasons that we need this amendment. We have a situation that has been weaponized, that is held up, killed, many good projects that would lead to our energy independence and to those very states that she's talking about. So I would urge the support of my amendment.
Okay. Reserves?
Reserves.
Gentlelady from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now I will reserve 2 minutes of my time to the distinguished gentleman from the great state of Virginia, Mr. Don Beyer.
The gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the permit bill is the bill you offer when you don't want to protect clean water. It's a very sad and extreme bill. And with respect to my good friend, Chairman Babin, this amendment only makes it worse. In 2023, the Supreme Court gutted clean water protections that we've relied on since the 1980s. And now the Trump administration is trying to make it the law that Americans don't deserve clean water. Already today, clean water protections have been defanged, leaving up to 80% of our streams and 50% of our wetlands at the risk of pollution or destruction. But my House Republican friends have offered this bill that further rolls back the remaining protections on clean water. Mr. Speaker, there are a couple of articles this week that make this why this is so important. Louisville, Kentucky, their water facility recently investigated why they had a spike in PFAS, so-called forever chemicals, and found out that a superconductor plant, Chemours, had dumped PFAS into the water called Gen X. And this is a company that knowingly violated the allowable dumping limit several times. The only way that folks knew that they were able to address this is because they found out that Chemours had been violating its Clean Water Act permit. Louisville citizens have not only had to pay for upgrades to make up for their company's violations, but now they face serious health risks. And this burden is only going to increase the burdens on Louisville taxpayers and everyone that is downstream on the river. And then a second article today from the Washington Post that mothers whose drinking water was downstream of sites contaminated with PFOA and PFOS, both which are considered likely carcinogens, were much more likely to lose their baby and more likely to have a preterm or low-weight birth. So pollution has impacts, and we're just beginning to learn about the impacts of PFAS in our water. The Trump administration said that they want to make America healthy again. A wonderful goal, a good idea, but this bill does exactly the opposite. So please, let's kill the bill, kill the amendment. It's dangerous to us all. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentlelady from Michigan reserves. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Yeah, how much time do I have, Mr. Speaker?
2 minutes remaining.
2 minutes. Yeah, I would like to yield to my friend from North Carolina, Mr. Rouser.
For how much time?
How much time do you need? A minute and 15 seconds. Minute and 15 seconds.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute, 15 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of the amendment offered by Dr. Babin. And let's be very clear about this. This amendment builds directly on the critical Clean Water Act Section 401 certification reforms that I authored in the underlying bill, reforms that refocus the 401 certification process on its original and proper purpose, and that is protecting water quality. You see, unfortunately, and in recent years, certain states have abused this process, using it as a tool to block or indefinitely delay infrastructure projects for reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with water quality. Dr. Babin's amendment strengthens judicial review for 401 certifications on major energy infrastructure projects by curbing frivolous lawsuits, and 2, ensuring expedited consideration when legitimate challenges are brought. That's all there is to it. It's very simple, straightforward, and actually exceptionally pro-environment. Support this amendment. I yield back to my colleague.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Texas reserves.
Reserve.
Gentlelady from Michigan is recognized.
Reserve.
Gentlelady reserves. Gentleman for Texas is recognized.
Well, I would just reiterate exactly what we said in my opening statement and what Mr. Rouser has stated. Many times the opposition is based on, has nothing to do with clean water whatsoever. It's been weaponized. We need to expedite this. As Mr. Rouse, my friend, said, this is extremely good for the environment, and I would still urge all of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support this amendment.
Gentleman yields back.
Yields.
Gentlelady yields back, or?
Yeah, okay. This amendment doubles down on 2 of the bad ideas in the base text of the Permit Act, limiting a state's right to protect its own water resources and limiting legitimate civil actions on harmful permits. I oppose this amendment and encourage my colleagues to do the same. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider amendment number 3, printed in Part A of House Report 119-399. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition?
I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 3, printed in Part A of House Report number 119-399, offered by Mr. Biggs of Arizona.
Pursuant to House Resolution 936, the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Biggs, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This particular amendment is a very simple, straightforward amendment. It deals with ranching lands that have been used for more than 40 years, and that it gives the ranchers the flexibility they need without Washington bureaucrats second-guessing their operations. So in Arizona, and in fact the entire western United States, drought cycles can last decades. In fact, Arizona and much of the West has been in a 30-year drought. Under the current 5-year window, pauses that ranchers and farmers might take can often revert to wetlands, triggering EPA oversight that locks out grazing. And my amendment recognizes the reality of the West and protects these parcels so they can return to production when conditions improve without fear of federal reclamation. During the Biden administration, expansive WOTUS interpretations treated dry washes and ephemeral streams as navigable waters, piling on permits that crippled ranchers and farmers in the West. And without grazing, you actually trigger something more devastating in some respects. Wildfires, where we've had a bit of a wet year. So we have grasslands in parts of the West now that are 2 feet in height, and when the summer comes and the heat comes and they dry up, they will trigger massive wildfires. Ranchers in my own district have spent hundreds of thousands, even millions on compliance costs, environmental assessments, legal fees just to access lands they've stewarded for generations, in some cases almost 100 years. This overreach hurts family ranches and contributes to a shrinking U.S. cattle herd, now at its lowest level since the 1950s, driving beef prices up more than 14% in the past year. And
By opening more land and cutting red tape, this amendment empowers ranchers to expand grazing, manage habitat, control wildfires, and meet market needs. I urge folks to adopt this amendment, and I'll reserve.
Gentleman from Arizona reserved. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Michigan seek recognition?
I rise in opposition to the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arizona.
The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
The gentleman's amendment would change the abandonment threshold for certain agricultural lands that had historically been wetlands. Under the 1985 Swamp Buster Act, farmers are discouraged from converting wetlands to farmlands by making farmers ineligible for federal farm program benefits if they drain, dredge, or fill wetlands for agricultural production after 1985. However, since 1985, the Clean Water Act has recognized that certain prior converted cropland would not be subject to the Clean Water Act permitting if those agricultural lands remained in production and are not abandoned for more than 5 years. This 5-year abandonment threshold has been in place for over 40 years and has balanced the need for certainty for farmers with the reality that some of these areas might revert back to critically important wetlands if abandoned by the farmer. The gentleman's amendment would upend this established practice and create more uncertainty on whether a renewed wetland is or is not subject to federal protections. In light of the ongoing assault on federal wetland protections undertaken by the Supreme Court, the Trump administration, and this bill, I do not support adding more uncertainty to the protection of critical waters and wetlands. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady reserves. Gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Thank you. What I would suggest is that you come out west, you take a look at the land, and you take a look at land that has been determined to be wetlands, dry washes, ephemeral streams, and say to yourself, well, why is that a wetland? Because when we get great rains, once every 3 years, that wash gets filled. But when you do not allow grazing, what you do is you give us a time for wildfires, you endanger the habitat, and you don't make things better. You make things worse. And this amendment helps cure that. And so with that, I'm going to reserve, and then I'll be prepared to close.
Gentleman from Arizona reserves. Gentlelady from Michigan is recognized.
I reserve.
Gentlelady reserves. Gentleman from Arizona is
Prepared to close.
Prepared to close.
Yep. Reserve.
Gentleman from Arizona is recognized
Yep,
to close.
you close first.
I think we've made the case here. You're not abandoning lands. You're taking lands that have been in production for over 40 years. They have to let it lie fallow, let it grow. But my colleagues across the aisle are saying, we don't care if they have to let it lie fallow. We don't care what the reality is in the West. All we care about is protecting the bureaucratic rule. And that's a doggone shame because beef production is incredibly low right now. And beef consumption is projected to be 28.6 billion pounds this year, but it's falling because of high prices. And what are we doing? We're saying we're going to import it from Argentina? What should happen is when you have a county in my state that normally has 60,000 head, and over the last 10 years that's gone down to 25,000 head, that's because of this rule that needs to be changed. So with that, I'll close and urge passage of the amendment.
Gentleman from Arizona yields back. Gentlelady from Michigan is recognized to close.
Thank you. I oppose this amendment for all the reasons asserted previously and encourage my colleagues to do the same, and I do yield back the remainder of my time.
The gentlelady from Michigan yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arizona. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider amendment number 4, printed in Part A of House Report 119-399. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition?
I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 4, printed in Part A of House Report number 119-399, offered by Mr. Biggs of Arizona.
Pursuant to House Resolution 936, the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Biggs, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to give context to folks about the West, but particularly my own home state. In my state, which is the 6th largest geographically in the nation, only 18% of the land is privately owned. All of the rest, 82%, is controlled by a government entity, state, federal, or reservation. My amendment is common sense, targeted. It directs the Secretary of the Army through the Chief of Engineers to review lands under their jurisdiction within 1 year and identify parcels suitable for water recharge projects like aquifer recharge and surface infiltration. That is a limited, very limited scope of the federally controlled land in Arizona. It streamlines permitting under Section 404 of the Clean Water Act. It minimizes red tape through categorical exclusions and collaboration with state agencies. This ensures federal lands become partners in water management, not barriers, allowing Arizona communities to secure the water they need. In Arizona, water is life. Yet over 95% of rainfall evaporates before it can even recharge aquifers. Even a small increase in recharge could substantially boost underground water supplies in Arizona. Drought cycles and federal restrictions have idled vast areas and threatened water security. My amendment promotes recharge efforts on federal lands, giving states the tools to capture and store water before it is lost. Now, I want you to know, in the 18% of land, we lead the world in recharge. We lead the world in recharge. And when you can recharge underground aquifers, you save lives and you promote good environmental quality. Under the Biden administration, routine water projects became regulatory nightmares, with EPA restrictions untailored to Arizona's desert reality. Securing permits often means chaotic delays from federal bureaucracies, even to access water on lands the federal government controls over 80% of Arizona. With only 18% of Arizona privately owned, streamlined federal permitting is essential. My amendment delivers by identifying hydrologically suitable federal land and cutting bureaucracy. I'll reserve.
Gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Michigan seek recognition?
To oppose the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Biggs.
The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, this amendment would be more appropriate in a bipartisan Water Resources Development Act instead of a toxic partisan assault on the Clean Water Act. Addressing the water supply needs of communities ought to be something we all agree on. While the gentleman's amendment would seek to address water supply needs through aquifer recharge projects conducted by the Army Corps of Engineers, it's being offered to a bill that will roll back clean water protections and increase costs for vulnerable communities. I urge the gentleman and other supporters of this amendment to engage with the bipartisan, collaborative Water Resources Development Act process to move their proposal forward. We'd love to talk to you about it. I oppose this amendment in this context, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady reserves. Gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Yeah, this amendment empowers local entities to expand recharge efforts, keeping aquifers full and communities strong in Arizona and the West. Arizona's rural economy depends on agriculture and ranching. We cannot allow water shortages to slow growth or drive up food costs nationwide. By investing in groundwater and stormwater recharge, this amendment increases supplies, lowers costs for farmers, and strengthens the domestic food chain. It removes red tape so Arizona can secure water for future generations. Identifying federal lands for recharge is simple, it's necessary, and it's appropriate. I urge my colleagues to vote yes, and I'll yield.
Gentleman yields. Gentlelady from Michigan is recognized.
I oppose this amendment, and I encourage my colleagues to do the same. We invite this amendment in the separate Water Resources Development Act process, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arizona. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 5, printed in Part A of House Report 119-399. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to withdraw that amendment.
Without objection.
I have an amendment at the desk.
It is now in order to consider amendment number 6, printed in Part A of House Report 119-399. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arkansas seek recognition?
I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 6, printed in Part A of House Report number 119-399, offered by Mr. Crawford of Arkansas.
Pursuant to House Resolution 936, the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Crawford, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Arkansas.
I thank the chair. This amendment is so great, you're not even going to believe it. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Chair, I rise today in support of my amendment to H.R. 3898, the Permit Act, that offers a solution to compensatory mitigation. Lack of wetland mitigation credits is holding back residential housing construction, and the availability credits are increasingly expensive. These costs are passed down to the consumer, exacerbating the already unaffordable housing market that the U.S. is facing. Unpredictable and lengthy permitting timelines for wetland mitigation banks are making it more challenging to bring new credits to the market. Moreover, the requirements to purchase mitigation credits located within the same hydraulic unit code, geographic area determined by surface hydraulic features, can mean the credits available at a nearby wetland bank can't be used if they're too far away. Without available credits, a builder's second option is in lieu fee programs. However, not all states offer this option, or builders can use a permittee responsible mitigation. Still, most builders are not equipped to carry this out. Both options are expensive and burdensome. My amendment fixes this issue by increasing the supply of mitigation bank credits, driving down the cost curve, and lowering home prices, both through directly lowering the regulatory cost of building a new home and allowing builders to use lots that the cost of mitigation today prevents them from using. Additionally, my amendment directs the Army Corps of Engineers and EPA to publish a revised compensatory mitigation rule that incorporates advances in science and lessons learned since 2007, promotes equivalency and flexibility among mitigation options, providing builders additional options beyond mitigation bank credits, speeds the approval of mitigation banks, including through the interagency review process, which provides numerous duplicative opportunities for Army Corps offices to raise the same concerns, allows for mitigation credits to be used across multiple hydraulic unit codes, and allows for out-of-kind mitigation where appropriate. Together, these changes will increase the availability of credits and provide alternatives to ensure that a lack of credits doesn't hamstring new developments. I urge my colleagues to support my amendment to H.R. 3898, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Arkansas reserves. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Michigan seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I'm generally an agreeable person, but I do have to oppose this amendment as well, offered by the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Crawford.
The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
As I have said throughout the proceedings today, I agree with Mr. Crawford that we have an outdated, overly cumbersome permitting process right now that is in dire need of reform. It is increasing costs, but the Permit Act and Mr. Crawford's amendment do nothing to address that. In fact, they add to the confusion and the burden. I oppose continued weakening of federal protections over our wetlands and streams as well, and I oppose this amendment because it further weakens any remaining federal protection to address impacts of these critical water bodies. There has been an ongoing assault on federal wetland protections undertaken by the Supreme Court, the Trump administration, and this bill. As a result of the Sackett decision, historic federal protections were lost on over 50% of our wetlands and up to 70% of our rivers and streams. As a four-season angler, I can tell you I take this personally. Now, the Trump administration is undertaking a rule to further erode federal protections on wetlands and streams well beyond and potentially in contravention to the Sackett decision. The Permit Act doubles down on these weakenings of federal protections and goes well beyond Sackett and is wholly inconsistent with the goals and purposes of the Clean Water Act. The Crawford Amendment, while potentially well-intentioned by focusing on mitigation of wetland impacts, misses the mark by letting inferior mitigation proposals be deemed sufficient. This includes mitigation proposals in different watersheds than impacts, mitigation options that do not address lost wetland functions, or removing mitigation requirements for so-called temporary impacts to wetlands. We all remember deadly flash floods overwhelming local communities this summer, a story that unfortunately will continue to unfold in more and more communities across the country as extreme weather events explode. A root cause of those flash floods is the slow removal of the critical benefits that wetlands play in upstream communities. I oppose the continued weakening of these federal protections because of the harm that they cause to these critical wetlands. I reserve the balance of my time.
Generally reserved. Gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman. I am very pleased to recognize that my friends on the other side of the aisle do recognize that we have a real big problem with compliance burdens and the costs associated with that, and how that prevents Americans from realizing the American dream of home ownership. And so as they raise the point of affordability, they neglect the fact that we can address affordability by reducing costs to potential homeowners. And so at least we can agree that we've got a cumbersome regulatory framework that needs to be fixed. This helps fix and actually is a proactive step in addressing the affordability crisis. And one of those things has to do with home ownership. And by doing this, or adopting this amendment, we're increasing the likelihood that an American can actually build a home and realize the American dream. And with that, I'll reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlelady from Michigan is recognized.
The housing crisis is felt acutely in West Michigan, and I have supported numerous bipartisan solutions to help get more homes, affordable homes, on the market, and permitting reform is a critical component of that, as I've said. However, this amendment, as well as the Permit Act itself, does nothing to address it. Soon, homeowners won't be able to afford whatever home they are able to purchase and build because of the rising costs of flood insurance or the floods that will devastate those new homes. At a time when costs are rising and flooding becomes more frequent, destroying just 1 acre of wetland will increase costs by $8,000 in additional payouts by American taxpayers through the National Flood Insurance Program. We can come to meaningful permitting reforms together by increasing the staff that we have to administer permits, cutting red tape that is truly hindering these permits from getting executed expeditiously. I've mentioned previously, but the Army Corps has lost their three senior-most experts, as well as an additional 15 to 30% of its regulatory staff. The confusion at the agency caused by this administration is adding to the increase in rising costs to the American people. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've heard this mentioned more than once today, and that is we need to increase the number of personnel to process and manage and administer the regulatory burdens that Americans are facing. Let me say that again. The Democrats say we need to increase personnel because the regulatory burden is so cumbersome, it takes additional personnel to be able to administer it. That seems counterintuitive to regulatory relief. And with that, I'm just going to urge passage of my amendment and yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I assume the gentlelady reserves. Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you. Adding additional staff is just one component of the overall permitting reform process that we hope to engage in a meaningful bipartisan way, because we know that there are bipartisan solutions on the table. In the past few years, we've seen the Supreme Court, the Trump administration, and the Republican Congress chip away at the historic Clean Water Act. Under the Supreme Court's misreading of this critical law, decades-old protections have been slashed for over half of our wetlands and up to 70% of our streams, resulting in almost 90% of our wetlands and streams losing protection. This amendment only worsens those protections. I oppose this amendment and encourage my colleagues to do the same, and I yield back the remainder of my time.
The gentlelady yields back to reclaim his time.
Yeah.
The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arkansas. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider amendment number 7, printed in Part A of House Report 119-399. For what purpose does the gentleman from Iowa seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 7, printed in Part A of House Report number 119-399, offered by Mr. Nunn of Iowa.
Pursuant to House Resolution 936, the gentleman from Iowa, Mr. Nunn, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Iowa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
I'd like to begin by thanking Representative Collins for his leadership on the Permit Act and Transportation and Infrastructure Committee for their joint work in a bipartisan way on many of this issue as the bill as well. I rise in support today of an amendment to the Permit Act that would establish a new state-led water quality pilot program through the Environmental Protection Agency. This amendment is straightforward, and like my home state in Iowa, it is something that can help in our rural communities. It supports states across the country in working to address water quality challenges using voluntary, science-backed conservation practices that our landowners and our local partners are already engaged in implementing. This issue hits particularly close to home for me. In the Hawkeye State, we have seen some of the highest nitrate levels ever recorded in our rivers and streams across Iowa. This year alone, the Raccoon and Des Moines rivers exceeded federal nitrate limits multiple times, requiring expensive water treatment to provide safe drinking water for more than 600,000 Iowans. And more than 600 water segments across Iowa are now listed as impaired, with just over 60% of our nutrient-impaired watersheds remaining on the 303D list. Now, Iowa has worked hard, as have many states, to address this issue. But the scale of the challenge demands better coordination and support from our federal government. My amendment would create a new pilot program to strengthen the state and federal collaboration in areas with nitrogen and phosphorus impairments, exactly what Iowa is struggling with. It would bring the Environmental Protection Agency to the table with states to help advance water quality improvements more efficiently and ensure that our existing tools and conservation programs work together as effectively as possible in a hybrid model. This pilot is fully voluntary and keeps the federal government in its proper lane. It does not impose any new obligations on a producer or a private landowner. But what it does do is it helps best practices already being implemented in places like Iowa and many other states who are working to meet ambitious nutrient reduction goals. This amendment will help ensure that projects designed to improve water quality can move forward smoothly and with support, particularly in those areas with watersheds. This approach is the type of state-led partnership that focuses on solutions the Permit Act is intended to help support. It accelerates the forward progress of water quality projects. It strengthens state leadership on this issue. It gets buy-in from communities. It promotes voluntary conservation work that everyone agrees is the best way to help our family farms, our local communities, our rural hometowns, and most importantly, water quality across this country. I respectfully ask that my colleagues support this common sense amendment as we move forward with the Permit Act. With that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Iowa reserves. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Michigan seek recognition?
I rise in opposition to the amendment offered by the gentleman from Iowa.
The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, this amendment is redundant. There are existing programs at the EPA that cover both nitrogen and phosphorus pollution control and mitigation for their impacts on impaired waters. Perhaps worse, this new program does not come with dedicated appropriations, which means that if stood up, this program would have to pull resources away from well-established EPA efforts to support water quality improvements in communities. It's expensive, and it does nothing. This amendment is window dressing for this bad bill. Instead, we should be working together on bipartisan efforts to support clean water and improve water quality. I encourage my colleagues to oppose the amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady reserves. The gentleman from Iowa is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While I appreciate the feedback from my colleague on the other side of the aisle, I'll remind the lady from Michigan that not every good answer comes out of Washington, D.C. In fact, many of them are best practiced right in our family hometowns. And where a state like Iowa and Des Moines have helped lead in water quality, and we want to do more, the lag time, the bureaucracy, the delay, the permitting coming out of Washington has made it only harder. This is a voluntary opportunity to create a pilot program that could create a new idea, make a good recommendation, capture a best practice and help instill it in a way that improves water quality not only at source, but downstream for every state as well. And while I support what the EPA is trying to do at the federal level, I think we've all recognized the EPA alone can't solve this. They need help from great leaders on the ground. Let's empower the locals to have the opportunity to also be part of the solution and not turn to, as you've noted several times, a long delayed permitting process in Washington to be a final solution for every challenge America faces. I reserve the balance of my time.
Member from Iowa reserves. Gentlelady from Michigan is recognized.
I'm a huge supporter of federal-state partnerships when it comes to protecting our waters and believe that localities and our states need to play a bigger role. However, this particular amendment is already in place, and without direct appropriations, we're tasking the federal government with creating even more programs that they don't have the resources to fulfill. It's costly and redundant, and that's why I'm opposed. I reserve.
Gentlelady reserves. Gentleman from Iowa is recognized.
I'm prepared to close. In closing, this amendment is about helping states succeed to improve their water quality, not creating a new mandate, not creating a new bureaucracy. It gives states the support they need to do the things that currently aren't being executed under good law or under current law. This is a good project-focused effort to help innovators at the source. It's smart, it's targeted solutions, it supports a cleaner water for our country, it's strong state leadership, it's better outcomes for communities, it is locally driven, not federally mandated. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support House Resolution 3898, my amendment, and I yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentleman from Iowa, Mr. Nunn, yields back. Gentlelady from Michigan is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, too much nitrogen and phosphorus in the water accelerates the growth of harmful levels of algae and bacteria. We see it firsthand in the Great Lakes every single year, forming algal blooms that are devastating to our Great Lakes rivers and streams. Significant increases in algae harm water quality, food resources, and habitats, and decrease the oxygen that fish and other aquatic life need to survive. The Clean Water Act has several regulatory and non-regulatory programs aimed at addressing nutrients, many of which suffer from the lack of federal funding to truly make a difference. Adding a redundant program without funding doesn't help us roll back red tape and streamline permitting, it only adds to the problem. I oppose the amendment, and I yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Iowa. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. In order to continue amendment number 8, printed in Part A of House Report 119-399. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I have an amendment to the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 8, printed in Part A of House Report number 119-399, offered by Mr. Peters of California.
Pursuant to House Resolution 936, the gentleman from California, Mr. Peters, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My amendment includes the language from my bill, H.R. 1948, allowing the International Boundary and Water Commission, or IBWC, to accept up to $5 million per year from other federal agencies or outside entities like cities, states, and nonprofit organizations for wastewater treatment and flood control projects like those that would fight cross-border sewage crisis in San Diego. The IBWC has jurisdiction over the South Bay International Wastewater Treatment Plant in San Diego, where long-standing operational and maintenance failures have allowed raw sewage to flow from the Tijuana River into San Diego's beaches. This has created a public health crisis that strains local resources, poses significant environmental risks, and forces our service members to train in polluted sewage water. Under current law, federal agencies, state governments, and local entities cannot transfer funds to projects under IBWC's jurisdictions. This leaves IBWC reliant on annual appropriations or emergency funding to build and maintain its facilities. My office, along with the rest of the San Diego delegation, has secured $360 million in emergency funding to help address chronic issues at the South Bay Treatment Plant. And I want to thank
all the people in this chamber who've supported that, including a number of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle who are veteran Navy SEALs and have been very concerned about this issue. This amendment would provide another tool to ensure San Diego does not need to move from emergency to emergency to secure adequate funding for the plant. If we can get money from other sources, there's no reason not to accept it. And for some reason, current law prevents us from accepting even a donation from a nonprofit that would want to help us with the issue. So I say let's get out of the way. H.R. 1949 passed the House on suspension in June of this year, and I hope to see it become law on any topical legislative vehicle before us. In this case, our amendment would authorize additional funding sources to further expedite the completion of clean water projects that fall under IBWC's jurisdiction. I think it makes sense, good for everyone, and I appreciate the support of my colleagues, and I yield back. I reserve.
Gentleman from California reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I rise to claim time in opposition to the amendment.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Although I claim time in the opposition, I do not oppose the amendment. I rise, in fact, in support of the amendment number 8 offered by my colleague from California, Mr. Peters, as it would allow the United States section of the International Boundary and Water Commission, or IWC as they call it, to address additional funding from receive additional funding, from other federal and non-federal partners to support water and wastewater infrastructure. This amendment will give the IBWC access to additional funding sources, enabling it to properly maintain these assets and in turn support cleaner training waters for our warfighters while strengthening security along our southern border. This amendment is the same text as H.R. 1948, which was favorably reported out of the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure and passed the House by voice vote earlier this Congress. So, Mr. Chairman, I urge my colleagues to vote in favor of the amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Reserve. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the support of my colleague, Mr. Rouser, and the committee urges the support of the amendment, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from North Carolina is recognized.
This is a good amendment. I urge adoption of it. I yield back.
The questions on the amendment offered by the gentleman from California, those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. There being no further amendments under the rule, the committee rises. Of the whole House on the State of the Union has had under consideration H.R. 3898 and pursuant to House Resolution 936, I report the bill as amended by that resolution back to the House with sundry further amendments adopted in the Committee of the Whole.
The chair of the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union reports that the committee has had under consideration the bill H.R. 3898 and pursuant to House Resolution 936, reports the bill as amended pursuant to that resolution back to the House with sundry further amendments adopted in the Committee of the Whole. Under the rule, the previous question is ordered. Pursuant to House Resolution 936, the question on adoption of the further amendments will be put in gross. The question is on adoption of the amendments. Those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. The question is on engrossment and third reading of the bill. Those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. Third reading.
A bill to amend the Federal Water Pollution Control Act to make targeted reforms with respect to waters of the United States and other matters and for other purposes.
Pursuant to Clause 1C of Rule 19, further consideration of H.R. 3898 is postponed.
Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess for a period less than 15 minutes.